Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is David Hansen. David Hansen has an innate affinity for all things related to land, codes, and ordinances. With 35 years of experience as a land development engineer, land planner, and land developer, he has been instrumental in the creation of over 10,000 single family and multifamily units, as well as 500,000 square feet of commercial spaces in various markets across the Mid Atlantic and Southeast regions. David, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Kendall. I appreciate it. What a great introduction. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for joining us on the show. Super excited to hear all about your journey. So let's jump right in. How did you get started in doing land deals?
It's interesting. Yeah, I graduated from college back in 1982, had no idea what I wanted to do. I actually, as soon as I got out of school, I went to work for a builder, building custom homes. And I got an opportunity to move to the DC area. And while I was there, I started out selling paper and office products. I never thought I would do that. And from that, I hated it. And one day I woke up and said, I have to find something different. And I grabbed the newspaper, I opened up the want ads, and I landed at civil engineering. No idea. In my early life, I wanted to be an architect. When I went away to college, I wanted to be an architect until I found out it was a 5-year program. And I was definitely a 4-year student. I went on a number of interviews, 5 to be exact. And at my last interview, I was talking to the guy that was interviewing me. And about halfway through, what I thought was about halfway through the interview, I said, "This all sounds great. When do I start?" And I stood up to shake his hand, and he goes, "How about Monday?" It's like, done. And that was 1988.
Wow.
And I went in having no idea what land development civil engineering was all about. And I lucked into having a number of very good mentors, essentially, at that firm, who basically set me on a path of learning and understanding zoning ordinances and how to apply them, and the basic tenets of land planning and land development.
Wow. Wow. So by accident that you found your
100,
way to land.
yeah, 100% by accident. So then I worked that firm that I started with. I worked there for almost 11 years. I was recruited out of them to go to one of the big national builders that I was actually doing work for. And I spent 2 years there, and I didn't like it that much. It was not that the working at the national builder was not it didn't excite. It didn't really have any direction for me. I was never going to be the division president, the division vice president. I bailed from there and went back into engineering for a couple of years. And it was at my second stint in engineering where I found that I was drawn to finding land deals. Yeah. And so I was at that firm. It's a big national firm now. I was there, but I opened their second office. It was a lot of fun. But I found myself at that crossroads where I thought I might be at that point where a conflict of interest may establish, because I was looking for land deals. There were people bringing land deals into the firm. I'm working on projects. And so I had to sit down with the owner of the company, who's still a very good friend of mine. And we had a very long conversation about why I felt it was time for me to depart them, because I was afraid that a conflict of interest may be a problem for them. At that point, I was working 4 huge land deals in Berkeley County, West Virginia. And this was right before the 2008 crash.
Wow. So, David, what was it about land that kind of hooked you when you first got into your very first land deal or came across the first potential project? What was it about that space that you were like, I think this might be my thing?
That's a great question. All of it. It's the soup to nuts look at how houses and homes get to where they are, and why they are where they are, and why there's preservation areas and restricted area, and all of those things kind of worked for me. I was at one point during this I don't know, career, this push. I was accused by the chairman of the board of supervisors in Loudoun County, Virginia, of being a tree hugging developer.
Ah,
And
tree hugging developer. Okay.
I listen, and this was during a public hearing, and I had to pause. And my response to her was, "And that's a bad thing." I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. I grew up surfing. I grew up with this whole idea of great outdoors and these great outdoor spaces. And I still to this day focus on projects that create great outdoor spaces. So that was really what drew me to this, was not only creating, envisioning these places where people live, but where people actually lived, not just where they went home every night and went to sleep.
Ah, that's beautiful. That is beautiful because there is a difference. There is a
It,
total difference.
there is a huge difference between just a home, a house, whatever. Those are all great. I love that. But there's something about community and being able to interact with your fellow human beings and in great outdoor spaces.
Absolutely. So you were working for the firm, you left the firm. What was it like branching out on your own and doing these land developments on your own?
It was hard. It was frightening at first. I had in the beginning, this is 2005. I had developed some great relationships at the firms where I worked with guys who were bringing big deals in and who were looking to do other deals. And so at that point, I created these great relationships, and that was what drove me to find bigger and better opportunities. Um, but I was headed somewhere. Now I forget.
David,
And
let me ask you for some
yeah,
context. So when you
yeah.
say guys are bringing in big deals, what did that look like?
Big,
What's your definition
oh
of big
God.
deals? Yeah.
So the firm I worked at, a very big firm. The projects I was working on at the time, one is built out now. It's called South Riding. It's in Loudoun County, Virginia. It's 6,000 lots. Another big project I worked on again in Loudoun County is called Lansdowne. It's 3 million square feet of commercial and over 4,000 lots. These were huge developments I was working on.
Wow. Wow. So what are the economics of that? What did that
Insane,
look like?
insane to sit there. I actually designed at one point. The firm I was working for wanted to kick out of a contract to design a 15 million gallon a day lift station. 15 million gallons a day.
A day.
A day.
Wow.
The lift station conveys the waste from the entire southwest portion of Loudoun County. Hundreds,
Wow.
like thousands and thousands of homes and commercial, and it was, to this day, it was probably one of my crowning things. It was one of the best things I ever designed and went through the process on. It functions today. It serves that entire area of Loudoun County. It has 330 horsepower pumps. It lifts waste up 100 feet to a 72-inch gravity system.
Wow. That's
So
remarkable.
imagine a gravity waste system where the pipe is 6 foot diameter.
Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the Only Land Fans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at onlylandfansgroup.com and join the conversation today. That's onlylandfansgroup.com. See you there. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're working at the firm, you
Yeah.
went out, branched out on your own. Tell us a little bit about what was that very first project like? What was it, that very first project that you did on your own?
I had three projects in Berkeley County, West Virginia. One is called Archer's Rock. The other is Morning Dove. Archer's Rock was 4,000 homes, a mix of single family, attached, and detached. And
Wow.
I had Centex, Pulte, NVR, and Equity Homes were the builders. I controlled and managed all of the entitlement and managed all of the land development.
Wow.
The other
So
one was, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in really quick and ask, so how did these projects come to be from the very like from scratch? Did someone bring you the land or did you find the land? How did that develop?
Wow, God, it's such a long time ago. In my dream, I found the land. Somebody might have brought it to me. Uh, I am again from my training as an engineer and a land planner. It was my land plan. I brought on the engineer. I brought in the investment dollars and brought in the contractor that did the construction. It was a Herculean project, to be honest. But unfortunately, 2008 arrived and the market crashed, and it was a very testing time.
I can imagine. I can
Yeah,
imagine. So, what does your business model look like today? If you had to explain it to someone you're sitting at a cocktail party and someone says, David, what do you do?
yeah.
How do you explain that?
I still call myself a land developer. Model today is I do everything. I still have everything in process. I've got projects that I'm bond releasing still in Northern Virginia, all the way to things we're negotiating contracts or looking at opportunities. Right now, I shy away from, and I will continue to shy away from pushing dirt unless it was something right where I am in Northeast Florida. It's a very difficult proposition to develop land if you're not there. I
Yeah.
know, and so for us right now, it is entitling projects. We have Rafi and I have probably 5 or 6 active projects, and I consult on a number of others. We have 1,500 lots in Augusta, Georgia, down to I've got the smallest one right now is probably 75 lots in Mobile, Alabama.
Excellent. And so, if someone's listening to this, we have a lot of land flippers that listen to this show,
Yeah.
and they're used to finding properties and then passing it off to someone like yourself that wants to do the entitlement process. So, if you had to talk to some of these people to find deals for you or someone similar to you, another land developer, what makes for a good entitlement project in terms of potential location? What do you look at?
I used to think I knew. Uh, I did. Honestly, I'm not joking. Today, honestly, I looked at a deal today with someone, and on the surface, I don't know whether it was the owner or someone else had some potential work done, some preliminary work done, and but at the end of the day, I looked at the project and I was talking with it was actually with a wholesaler, and I said, it first off, it's what the entity that did this sketch, they're hoping for a rezoning. But I looked at the property and said, I don't think it's worth rezoning. I think it's worth doing as it's zoned today with slightly bigger lots. It's in a great location. And I think it's worth more money. And the wholesaler actually laughed and said, I thought everybody wanted more lots.
Mm,
And I said, sometimes yes. But sometimes you actually have to look at more nuance. Is more lots better or are fewer lots better? Is the location, could I do a private entrance with a gate and have 11 lots? Or should I go through the rezoning process and go for 15 lots, 4 more lots? Can I get more money from looking at it from a different way? And I'm trying not to evade your question, but that to me made more sense.
totally.
And sometimes that's the way I tend to look at things. I don't look at this, wow, I could roll in here and do 1,500 lots. Is the site, is the property, is the community? What's better served if I go about it a different way?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Begin with
Yeah.
the end in mind. So, If you had to do some sort of training for a land wholesaler or a land flipper that wants to work with a developer, and
Yeah.
they said, listen, David, I'm going to go out and find whatever you tell me I should find. What are you looking for? What would you say to that person for them to be able to narrow their search and what types of properties they're looking at?
Again, great question. And God, I don't want to discourage anyone from anything. And I've learned this again over the last few years. As I said earlier, I came from an environment where I was working in one jurisdiction in Virginia, years and years. And I moved my family to Florida. I figured out that I can do what I do like almost anywhere in the country. And from that, I'm learning to look at things a lot differently. And I was helping a guy, I still am, on some stuff in Texas. And I had no idea about these minor subdivisions.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
anything I'd ever looked at. And we took 98 acres just outside Austin, Texas. I showed him how to create 8 insanely good lots. And the gent made untold, he made several $1,000,000. And but for me, I had it again, coming from a background of land, real live land development, it initially made no sense. But through the process of laying out the lots for him, explaining from my side what made sense, it started to change the way I look at things. So if I were talking to someone going, what am I looking for? I'm looking for opportunity.
Got it.
Every piece of property has opportunity. You just have to be able to look at it, not necessarily, you got to remove the blinders. It can't
Mhm.
be about, okay, I'm looking at this piece because I'm going to do a minor subdivide and I'm going to do 10-acre lots. And if it's 5 miles outside of a major city, that's a fool's errand. There's something better there. If
Right.
it's 15 or 20 miles outside, does the minor subdivide work? But does it, why? Does it work? Is it for residential or, and in that one outside Austin, what I learned was inside of Austin, to buy a piece of light industrial land, 2 acres of light industrial will cost you $1,000,000. 10 acres of unregulated property, 20 miles outside of Austin, will cost you 350 grand. Where would
Mm.
you rather be?
Yeah.
And but again, coming from my background, it would be I would have never looked for that. But while going through the process and seeing the people that showed up starting to look at these 10-acre lots, I was like, wow. So I will tell you this, the last lot the guy sold for 750K.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
Wow.
the whole time I'm explaining to him, hey, these aren't guys buying this for a lot. They're this, like, one of the groups that bought was going to do a concrete mixing facility. And I was like, this is light or marginally heavy industrial in this, because great access, great location. So looking at things, I learned to take my blinders off.
Yeah. That's really good advice. So
So
we've heard there's a lot of discussion around entitlement. We hear it's like a hot topic right now in the land space
yeah,
is entitlement deals. We hear rezoning. Sometimes we hear those two terms used interchangeably. Can you talk a
yeah,
little bit about entitlement, rezoning, how those two work hand in hand? Are they the same? How would you explain that?
they are interchangeable. They are not the same. So for my side of things, generally what I would tell someone is if a deal doesn't work, buy, it's going to still be marginal rezoned.
Hmm. Can
Even
you explain a little bit more?
yeah, the cost, and again, everything, it's tough because everything is predicated on where you are, the jurisdiction, the location, what the timing is on a rezoning application. Again, I came from Northern Virginia. A rezoning application in Northern Virginia is 2 years. So the time value of money over 2 years, the capital outlay over 2 years, and the return over 2 years it starts to become very murky. Other jurisdictions, a rezoning may be a lot different process. It may be an opt-in you opt into a zoning district, and in other jurisdictions you don't opt in. They actually rezone you and write you your own zoning code. I'm working on a project right now in South Carolina where it has its own zoning code. So
Wow.
it was rezoned in 2006. And there's a recorded the recorded documentation is new zoning code just for that piece of property. And
Wow.
it's specific, and you can't vary from it almost at all. So
Wow.
every jurisdiction in the country has a different way that they handle things, whether it is from the entitlement standpoint, which on my side happens once you're zoned. Once you have zoning, then you're rolling through the entitlement process. A by right zoning application, just had one approved in Alberta, Alabama, actually for a friend of yours.
Yeah, very good.
We just went through the process in Alberta, and he's approved now, 83 lots with a by right application. And the process, I don't want to quote, I'd have to look to be specific on how long the process took, but let's just say that process took 9 months. And it was approved. And right now we're working towards LDPs, which is the land disturbance permit. And for Art and his partner Emmanuel, they're going to sell to Miranda Homes. And that should happen sometime in the next month or two.
That's
But
exciting.
that's an entitlement process. Takes it from a sketch plan through construction documents, CDs, and preliminary and final plats, to where then a builder or a developer can go out in the field and actually do the construction. For me, rezoning is outside of that process. Say you're zoned agricultural, and you want to zone yourself for single family residential, a certain number of units per acre. That's a process that takes you through. It's a very public process. You appear before, whether it's both a planning commission and a county commission or a board of supervisors. And going through the rezoning process, you actually have to, you end up, whether it's proffering or giving something on your side to achieve the zoning that you're seeking. There's a huge difference between that and a by right application.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard from many people that have gone through this rezoning process that it's a lot more political than we even imagine.
It is insanely political. I tell everyone, I've been yelled at by people at public hearings in more jurisdictions than I care to think about, and they don't know you. They don't care. All they know is they're there to complain. And the ones that I love the most are, because you actually can ask questions sometimes that I always ask, like, so where do you live and how big is your lot? I live in the subdivision next to you on a 6,500 square foot lot. Okay, ma'am, our minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. What actually, please tell me what bothers you about our project.
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's Triple Digit Flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything. What are some of the common objections that you get?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Everybody, honestly, everyone thinks that they are the last one in. Shut off development. Traffic is awful. This is awful. That is, it's there. There's nothing. It just, again, when you get in, that's why I try and avoid rezonings. I try and avoid the political, anything political like that, because you leave the point of subjective, or you're all subjective, and you leave the objective. By right work is objective. You have a written code, you have written standards, you have to follow them. And when you're in the process, if the staff has a comment that's subjective, you can reply. You can't ask me that. You can only ask me to adhere to this.
Right.
But once you get to subjective, where you're sitting before a board and you're sitting before this planning commission, and it doesn't matter which one of them is, but they live in a community and everybody in their community is going, I don't, then they're looking at it, their whole view is skewed. And all I know is every one of my neighbors hates your project. Yeah.
So what determines if a project has to go through by right or through rezoning?
The zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance. And normally when I'm talking with folks, I get a lot of calls from people, or they reach out, whether it's Messenger, Facebook, whatever it is. Could you look at this project? I always look at stuff. And part of the reason I do that, and I know my partner Rafi hates it, is you shouldn't do this. And I said, listen, I talk to people. If someone reaches out to me, I'll communicate with them. I'll talk to them. And the basis for that for me is I would rather, like if you reached out to me and said, David, look at this project for me, I'd look at it for you in a heartbeat. And the reason for that is I would rather give you $1 million worth of free advice than follow you into a project where the waters are muddy. And I've got to unwind something that, or attempt to unwind something that someone has done, because that makes it that much more difficult. And folks that get involved in contracts and don't understand what the ramifications are outside the bounds of the contract. What they're doing to a seller, they're giving a seller a false sense of something. With you deliver a contract, you give a contract to somebody, they have a sense that you're going to settle, right?
Yep.
And that you're going to act on the contract as written. But you do it from a standpoint of where you are in the deal. You've been doing it long enough. There's so many folks out there that haven't been doing it long enough that I just got to get my first deal, so I'll give you whatever you want. And you would come into the same conclusion if you followed someone into a deal like that. You'd be going, what made you think that was reasonable?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now I got to sit down with that owner and I've got to explain to them that was fantasy. I'll give you reality, and I can settle on reality, and I can make reality happen. But what you thought was there is not. And that's where I've come from over the last couple of years talking to people, is just, I'd rather give you, like I said, I'd rather help you figure out how to get it real and make it work than have you muddy up a person that clearly wants to sell. So keep them in reality. Anyway,
yeah, can you drill down a little bit into that process? Could you give us like a 30,000-foot view of what that would look like? Just typical. Yeah. Every single deal is different. I know every seller is different. But if you had to give us this is what the process typically looks like. How does someone go through that? How do they go through that process?
I think the craziest thing is, and again, I've worked and talked with a lot of folks like you guys. I will go back to, I admire you guys flipping lots. Is so awesome to me. Really is. The funniest things that guys get out of flipping lots and they're like, oh, I got that thing under contract in 2 days. Most big land contracts, a month, 2 months, negotiating all the nuances in a contract and all of the terms. Right now, I think we are probably within, and I might have mentioned this in a Facebook comment I made, almost a year at this point on a deal in Tennessee where the owner had a health crisis and a couple other things. But we stayed with it, negotiating back and forth on minutia within the contract. And we are almost at a year now. It's just so much different because one wrong commitment in the contract and the idea of whether you can perform, whether you're going to spend $300,000 and then have to settle on something before you have an approval or before you've got some jurisdictional action is a danger.
So, what would be some rules of thumb that you could provide to make sure that the investor is doing things the correct way, or doing things that is just above board for both the seller, for themselves?
Yeah.
How would you go about that?
If you're going to if what your focus are these entitlement projects, being upfront and honest with a seller, we don't, the builders don't, no one's settling before they have an approval. No one. Unless the deal is so good that it's too hard to pass up. In the last 2 years, I'll go back to with Rafi and I, we settled on one piece. It's part of our assemblage in Augusta. And the bottom line was, it was absolutely too good to pass up.
What made it too good to pass up? What was you could give us an example.
The base zoning was basically multifamily, and the price was the current owner had bought it at a tax sale. And he actually thought he was buying a hunting property.
Wow.
And all he wanted to do, he just didn't want it on his books.
Wow.
And it was in the middle of Augusta, Georgia. So price-wise, zoning-wise, one conversation, and we were like, okay, we just have to buy it. So, yeah, it was an honest-to-God unicorn.
Wow.
Yeah. So
do you remember the numbers in that deal? Like, what was the buy and what was the exit?
Yeah, we haven't exited yet. I can tell you. Heck, I don't care. So we have 350 acres in Augusta, Georgia. We have it under contract right now we actually own it all, except for one small piece at $1.6 million, and our outsale contract is $7 million.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about a unicorn. That's amazing.
But the part of it that was the unicorn is 90 acres, and we picked it up for $290. But it's zoned R3, so it is actually it's basically 300 plus units.
Wow.
So that was one. Honestly, we had to sit there and go, we gotta buy it. We were under contract on everything else in the assemblage, and we've since settled on it. But that one was, and again, the guy was like hardcore. He was like, no, I want to settle in 60 days. So we were, man, I don't want to do it, but we got it. You can't let it go. There are like that pop up, not real often, but that was too good. We're just way too good to pass up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So coming back to those rules of thumb, making sure that you're clear with the seller that things can't happen until we have all of the approvals. Are there any other things that you would make sure?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I start out. We don't do anything that isn't where we don't have at least 90, preferably 120 days to study. And we always contract with an initial deposit and then a second deposit if we issue our notice to proceed at the end of the 90 or 120 days. At that point, the deposits are hard. Generally, we try and keep our deposits at least, I don't want to call them nominal, but enough to get the seller's attention, but keeping in mind that we're gonna probably spend several $100,000 in entitlement. To give you an idea, we have a project in Columbia, South Carolina. It's 108 acres. We've got 217 lots. It's under contract to sell to a large regional builder. But on that one, I forget where I was headed. I hate
We're
when that
talking
happens.
about we were talking about deposits.
Oh, we have nominal deposits on that because the discussions with the seller were such that we explained we were going to spend close to 350,000 in entitlements, and our entitlement budget is 327,000. We're probably going to hit that when you factor in survey, engineering, wetlands, geotech, environmental, and any other transportation and a couple of other. But yeah, right now our budget's 327,000. So explaining to the seller that we're going to invest 350,000 in entitling your land, and if for some reason and we don't see it, we don't close, you get all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good.
So that's I guess that's the biggest thing is I know that a lot of sellers want people to put up a lot of money in the front. We go through that all the time. We always negotiate our way around it. There's hard and fast things we will and won't do, but giving away money for the option of studying somebody's property is something that I'll never budge on. I won't do that.
Yeah, that's really good. So what would, for example, in that particular case, what was your deposit on that?
Our initial deposit was 10. Our second deposit brought that up to 30. And we built in on that one, we have 4 built-in 90-day extensions that we're buying for 10 apiece.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned as well about after the second deposit, then both deposits go hard. What's the process of getting those deposits back? What are the cases in which that you would be able to get those deposits back? How have you structured that?
Here's the other thing. We don't go hard unless we have builder interest.
Mm,
I don't
very
proceed. But again, that goes back to I think one of your first couple of questions is how do you structure things? The way I like to structure things is that in order to issue our notice to proceed, I have a handful of LOIs from builders. I'm not one that will go down the path of entitling something for the sake of entitling it. I know there's a lot of guys out there that like to do that, say, I'll just size my lot to whatever works for the majority of builders. I'll do 50-foot lots and I'll do 65-foot lots, and that kind of works for everybody. I don't like to design in a vacuum.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't go past, if we're not negotiating a contract while we're issuing our notice to proceed, we don't proceed.
Yeah, super smart.
You leave money on the table. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
That said, I would rather, I'm actually in this to build. I've been doing it a long time. I build relationships. And I would rather do 10 deals with a builder than one. And I'd rather be covered during the time I'm engineering and have the builder with me. So we're siting his houses. So the lots fit his product. The structure fits his program. Then get down to the end where I've got 217 entitled lots and I can't sell them to anybody because nobody has product that fits them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. That makes total sense. So, David, if someone were listening to this and let's say very comfortable in the land flipping game, they do this for a living and they want to get into the entitlement process, but they don't understand, or maybe they're not quite sure what that looks like. What are the basic steps from finding that raw piece of land to closing it with the builder? Could you walk us
Right.
through a really generic,
Nightmare.
general a nightmare?
Yeah.
So we got that out of the way. It's a
Call
nightmare.
Art right now, get him on, and he can tell you what the nightmare is. No, it's, you know what? If you've never done it, it's funny. So if you were to sit beside me for a month and watch me go through it, you go, oh, that looked easy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's anything else. Everything is something that you do every day and is second nature to you. To the person on the outside looking in goes, oh, that looks really easy.
Right.
The most difficult part of it is, I would say, it starts at the beginning, negotiating the contract to where you have a basis that makes sense is paramount.
Mm.
Because the seller's got a number in his head, and you think you're pushing and you think you know everything about it. And if you agree, you end up 6 months down the road where, wow, the numbers aren't as great as I thought they were.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Only Land Fans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action. Got it.
That's probably the most difficult thing to understand, coming from the land flipping, where you guys are doing stuff in weeks, right?
Depends on the deal.
Week, you got like a 30-day turnaround. Imagine the things that can go on in 12 to 18 months.
Sure. It's a whole different animal.
Yeah, it is. That's probably the biggest thing if I could give any words of advice, it would be, don't kid yourself. The end is the same. It's a piece of land. I'm trying to sell at the end of the day, whether it's 100 acres or 0.24 acres, it's a building lot or building lots. But all of the moving parts in an entitlement deal are magnitudes greater in missing one item and having it kill your deal.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I completely get that.
Yeah, like I'll say, I'm working on a deal with somebody in Sarasota, Florida, where we sent the wetland guy out, and I'm looking at it going, hey, look, I looked at the soils. Soils say they're hydric. We'll have to see. Water table says one thing. The wetland guy came back, and basically the whole property is a wetland.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That'll kill it.
But it's 26 lots. It's a really good deal. Can we mitigate? What's the mitigation cost? And again, I'm part of a couple of wetland and nutrient offset banks in Virginia, and I know what they cost there. But this is a deal in Florida, so we're talking to the wetland. Okay, so how much are the wetland credits? The guy goes, 190 grand a credit. You need 3.6. I'm like, that's 700 grand. He goes, yeah. Okay. So you gotta look, okay,
Yeah.
how much everything is in its ups and downs of those kind of numbers.
Sure.
That's where things get a little shaky.
Right. Now, whenever you approach a project, do you have a typical order in terms of, okay, I like to have, like, when does the wetlands guy come out? What's the very first thing that you have checked out? Then I
love this. Yeah. So I'm a civil engineer and a land planner.
Right.
And for anything that I look at, I do all my own due diligence. I've been dealing with soils, and I had to look at the soils, the overall soils. I can look at things and basically have an idea what we're going to run into, which is a lot different from somebody else who's got to bring in a bunch of consultants to do the same thing. From my end, when I'm looking at a project for myself, I do my own sketches, all my own land plans, and that saves a lot of upfront dollars. But you hit a great point. One of the first things I always do is, depending on where you are, is I call it a desktop wetland survey. I do a lot of work along the eastern seaboard, a lot of wetlands. So I do a desktop. I've got pretty good consultants, again, up and down the eastern seaboard, who can help me with that. And that sets the tone, because again, with wetlands and the Corps of Engineers, their first deal is avoidance. You got to avoid them. Can't avoid them, then you move into mitigation, and that gets expensive. So my first thing is outside of my own scope is always going to be wetlands, because it's generally the biggest concern. Depending on state, my next thing is a preliminary geotech. If you're in Florida, it's going to be groundwater. Geotech will come out to let you know what the elevation is to groundwater. Very critical. It determines how deep you can dig a pond, how much fill you're going to have to bring in to raise the houses up above the groundwater. If you are working in, as you go north, towards the north of Florida, or if you're in Virginia or Maryland, it's going to be the geotech for rock. You want to know where you're going to hit refusal. Throughout most of Virginia, I can tell you, until you get in the mountainous area, it's 5 to 8 feet. Depending again on where you are in the ranges, whether it's the Appalachians or the Blue Ridge, depending on how much is sloughed off over the years. I just looked at a project in North Carolina where surface rock and refusal at 2 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
those kind of things change whether or not a project works. It has a lot to do with are the construction companies there? Are they used to blasting for rock? Has everybody been avoiding that and working on good sites? And they avoid it. Virginia, everybody blasts. They know they got to blast. It's not a question. Florida, you don't have to blast. But if you're working in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and you find out you have to blast, then most contractors will shy away from that property because they want something that, that unknown is removed.
Yeah, that makes total sense. What are some of the common deal killers that you come across?
Deal killer. Basis. Land basis is always going to be a deal killer.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, land basis, the bottom line is, and a tough one, because at the end of the day, land is going, if you're looking at ag land, it's going for a certain price somewhere. That's the number. If you're looking at development land, it's going for a certain price somewhere. And at this point in development, in areas where development is happening, you've developed all the easy land. Not necessarily all the good land, but all the easy land's been developed. So now you're dealing with these, what is it going to take to get this deal to be able to develop this? But basis is the cost per lot. Raw land, the cost per lot, as it's applied to what it's going to cost to develop it, what it's going to cost to deliver it to the builder. So at the bottom end of that is the raw land basis. And what I see a lot of folks in our industry right now looking at are deals that a property next door to somebody sold, and the owner of that heard that D.R. Horton came in and paid X for that. But D.R. Horton paid X for that after somebody had entitled it. And so this guy goes, I want the same for my land. Your land's not entitled, and so I can't pay you that because the land basis, the bottom number, doesn't allow me to get to where you need to get to. And I know a lot of folks in their rush I want to put it under contract. I want to start this. I've run all my comps. I can get 100 lots on there, and they're this, and I know this went over here. But what a lot of people leave out is that the cost, the hard cost of development, and how it affects what a builder can pay for a raw piece.
Yeah, that's a really good example. That's really good.
So basis to me, it ends up being either the killer or where you see guys struggling. And at the end of the day, the vision, I'm going to make $1 million on this. And at the settlement table, they get 250,000. And they're like, what happened? It all evaporated along the way. But had you been prepared, you should have known that you were at that 250.
Right. That's really good. Now, you mentioned working with builders earlier. You talked about that you don't let your deposits go hard until you have some LOIs from builders. Can you give us some examples of how you work with builders? What does it look like in a deal where you present them to get LOIs, and talk to us through that process?
Yeah, well, so again, I've been doing it a long time. And so I built over the years, I built relationships with most of the national builders. And so if I'm in, just to give you a quick example, Ryan Home. So I know I worked with Ryan Home since 1990 in Virginia. That's where they're headquartered. I know their upper management now. I watched them rise up through the ranks. I've got a couple of guys at their headquarters that if I'm working on a deal and I know Ryan Holmes is in that market, I can make one phone call there and I will get an email and a phone introduction to a division president, a division vice president in that market. And so that's how I start with that. And I do the same. I've got good relationships with the guys at Horton, Century Complete, with division presidents, division VPs, Toll Brothers. So I generally try and work off of relationships that I've built over years to foster an introduction, afford me an introduction into a new or an opening market with regional builders. You know, oddly enough, with some of the great regional builders, it's come from our relationships with the nationals, where somebody leaves and goes to a regional in an area, and they reach out to me going, "Hey, we were talking about this deal while I was at that guy. I want to keep doing deals with you." The other thing, and I wrong or indifferent, I don't know. And it's funny, I had this conversation with somebody else not long ago. I leave meat on the bone. I'm not out there. No one project is a retirement project. I know there are guys like, that lot's worth $25,000 a lot. All right, well, sell it. There's 270. Sell them for 20, and I guarantee you, the guy that you sell them to 20 for will take your call the next time. He doesn't want to get in a bidding war. He doesn't. He wants to know that he's got a deal, that you're honorable, that you'll stand up to it, and he'll continue to take your calls. The other thing I do, Kendall, is I don't shop guys against each other. I go into a deal. I put the deal out there. I will talk to I tell everybody, dude, I'm talking to everybody in the market. Get back to me with your price, and I'll look at it. And I've had guys go, "What did so-and-so pay?" Doesn't matter. I'm going with them. That's the price they gave me. Well, why didn't you tell them? No, I go with, I always ask what I think I'd like. And I see the numbers come in because I know what the lots are worth. It's not rocket science, for God's sakes. I know what they're worth, but I know what I can live with, and I know what I can negotiate to. One of the other things I always tell somebody, like if I think the lots are worth 20, I'm going to ask 25. They're going to come to me at 15 or 18. I'm going to go, let's go to 20. But I learned a long time ago, I can't start at 15 and negotiate you up. So I got to start where you're not looking at me like you're out of your mind. But I also, like I said, I don't shop guys. And I think that's critical. I know a lot of people I want the best number, and I'm gonna hold out until I get the best number. But are you making enough money? Are you making money at 20? Why are you pushing everybody to 25? It doesn't change the market. Doesn't change anything. What, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, what it does is that you may win them on one deal, but they're not going to come back to you.
Yeah.
I'd rather be able to call somebody in a market, we did a deal, or even if we didn't do a deal, I was honest with them the whole way through, and I can call them and go, "Hey, look, we didn't do that one. I've got another project in this other division. Can you give me a contact there?" Right. And I've never not had someone at a national builder connect me with somebody else in a different divisional office. Never had that happen.
Yeah, that makes total sense. We hear a lot in business in general, regardless of what industry you're in, what your customer base is, that there is such a thing as a lifetime value of a customer, and we want repeatable business. And so that makes total sense. It makes total sense to me. So what are some of the things, if you had to just give us a quick short list, these are the things that that the builders want to see to be able to make a decision?
Yeah, that's a great. There you go. Yeah, you know what? I got to give you your props, man. You're asking some amazing questions, and again, and it's actually interesting to me. Just watch this again. I just learned about all the Facebook groups within the last 2 years, too. So I'm like a newbie when it comes to all that, but I read everything. And I just saw something the other day where somebody was lamenting a deal that they were in with D.R. Horton, and I was shocked. D.R. Horton's contracts are they're they are they are in sync. Everything is there. They tell you what you have to do. They tell you what you have to provide. They tell you when their study's going to start, which is at when they issue their notice of suitability. And they tell you how to get to the notice of suitability. And it shocks me when people go, "Oh, I gave them everything they wanted." Okay, then why didn't you get your notice of suitability? I don't know. No, there's something. The other thing they do, they'll put you under contract, but they're not going to call you every day and go, "Hey, we're missing the wetland study. We're missing the water availability letter." They're not going to do that because they got you under contract. They don't have to. It's your job.
Yeah,
Read the contract.
that's good.
Make a checklist for yourself. If there's 10 things on their deliverables, make a checklist. As you send it, check it off. When you hit the 10th one, call the guy and go, "Hey, you got all my deliverables. I need that notice of suitability." I don't know that I said any differently than that. The builder's contracts are very specific in what they need.
That's really good. And so are there a, I know probably every builder is different. There's probably very specific things that certain builders want over others, but are there
They're
general
all the same.
things? Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of, yeah, they're typically going to want this, they're going to want to see this, they're going to see X. If someone's never done a deal with a builder before, what can they expect that they'll need to deliver?
I don't know on your individual lot things. You're probably better on that than I am, but I can guess. I've done enough. But on a large contract, when you're looking at whether it's an entitlement deal or if they're going to buy you out early and they want to run the entitlement, they're going to want a boundary survey, topo, and they're going to want an ALTA survey. I know a lot of guys don't like to do ALTAs. The surveyors push back. ALTAs are expensive. Every single builder wants an ALTA survey.
What's the difference? Can you tell us?
ALTA. The difference is on an ALTA, there are very specific items that have to be on it that go right back to a title commitment. And some of the stuff is very superfluous. It could be fence lines, parking lots, existing buildings. There's a ton of little nuances in an ALTA, but every single builder wants an ALTA survey. And a lot of guys, I know a lot of guys on my side go, "Oh, I'm not going to do an ALTA. I'm just going to do a boundary. I'll let the builder do the ALTA." Okay, that's going to take them an extra 2 months. Just do the ALTA, pay the extra 10 grand, get the ALTA, then that's gone off your list. I know
Really?
it seems like a waste. To be realistic, it is a waste. But the bottom line is what the title companies that represent the builders want to see is that ALTA logo at the bottom of the survey for them to sign off on their title commitment. Just do it.
Just put it in your costs and get it done.
It is right. But you can either do it now or you can complain. And I don't know why their study hasn't started yet. They're waiting on an ALTA.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. That's good insight. That's good insight.
Wetland study, geotech, environmental, phase 1, if necessary, a phase 2. And a lot of them want a preliminary and a for construction geotech. Two different things. A preliminary is a broad brush on the whole site, gives you what your soil types are, what some of the soil characteristics are. An actual geotech, a full geotech, hits the center lines of the road so they can do their CBR tests and things like that on it. They want those. The phase one and the phase two. A phase one environmental is basically a desktop with a quick field visit. A phase two is anything they find in the phase one that they deem needs further investigation, links up a phase two. Depending on where you are in the jurisdiction, I know I'm doing a deal in Sarasota, Florida. You got to have a tree survey, threatened and endangered species. The builders won't move without those in their list. And all of those things are listed in the contract.
Got it. Yeah, really good. Well, that's fantastic. It's fantastic to get some insight into that, especially for anyone who's not done that type of deal where they've actually gotten to the point where they see the contract. At least we know what to expect. So that's really good stuff. Let me ask you something. What is something, in your opinion, that not enough people are talking about in the land industry that we should be talking about right now?
Man, I'm going to go back to my roots: preservation of open space and livable communities.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a reason why Rafi and I came up with open land communities. Part of our focus is we prefer to deal with jurisdictions that have open space and conservation options in their ordinance. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that for me. Over the years, I've been directly instrumental in close to 5,000 acres in the Commonwealth of Virginia in permanent conservation. I know where we got to live, but I also know that at the end of the day, the planet's got to be here. And trees and the flora and fauna that go with it are integral to who we are, how we live, and whether or not we're going to persist. So for me, I think that real livable communities with commercial, resident, with a mix of uses close by are paramount to my vision. And I think that's what gets lost often, where people are with this idea that I've got to cram everything I possibly can into this piece of property. Sometimes that's not the best. Maybe looking back, and I'm working on a project in Cleveland, Tennessee, that I could have 7,500 square foot lots. But the reality is what the property wants to be is 15,000 square foot lots, estate lots, preserve a huge chunk of the existing forest. To me, that's more critical than maxing out the yield. It's being cognizant of a better environment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. So, can you talk a little bit about where you see the market shifting? There's a lot of talk right now about the market shift, and so I'd like for you to get out your crystal ball if you could. Tell us, where do you see the market shifting, and how is that directly impacting your industry?
That's crazy. Yeah. So I'll be honest. I work in right to work states. It's me. I'm sure I'll offend people, but I don't really care. I have nothing untoward against unions. I've never been in a union. I understand the necessity and the love that folks have for them. I also understand the overarching jurisdictional crush that they have on things. It's an interesting thing where I start looking in the states where we're active, from Virginia down to Florida, from Georgia across through Alabama up to Tennessee and Kentucky. And I have folks ask me, I'm looking at a project now in Indiana, and we looked at a number and I could never figure out how to make them work. And I actually had someone ask me, Indianapolis is great. And I'm like, you're right. I said, but if I was looking around Indy, I would look in northern Kentucky. And they're like, why? And I said, because Kentucky is, aside from the coal mining, but they're generally a right to work state. And if you look, you'll see people's preference to live in a Kentucky and maybe drive over the river and go to work in Indiana or Ohio is a higher drive than wanting to live in Ohio. I can't figure out the Rust Belt states. I've tried. I can't. And I don't know where you are, Kendall. I can't figure out those states for some reason, the focus and the drive. What I see is a continued exodus from the Northeast and the Midwest to the Southeast, Texas, Arizona. I see the areas in coastal Alabama and Florida growing. I see a lot of folks, maybe it's just because of my age. I'll be 64 this year. And I think I see folks looking at, yeah, and we left Virginia. I'm a native Floridian, but we left Virginia. I was tired of shoveling snow. I was tired of you lose basically 4 or 5 months out of the year where it's just like, do you even want to go out of the house? I live in Northeast Florida, and I don't think I've put on a pair of trousers in 4 years.
Yeah.
And I like that. I'm
Right.
actually really good with that. So I think, but I see that from I think, I guess I'm a baby boomer. I think we're probably the biggest population. Everybody's retired. Where are they looking? They're like, damn, I'm done with certain things. I want this. I'm actually seeing, and I'm citing, and I'm doing some things with some interesting building product. I don't know if I should broadcast folks, but I will. I know they're all doing it now, but right now, Ryan Homes, who I do a lot of stuff with, I like those guys. They're building a product that they're killing it with in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a cottage.
Mm.
It is a 17-foot wide, 43 feet deep, 2-story, 2.5. No garage, because you're in the Southeast, you don't really need it. It's basically a detached townhouse. You have windows on all 4 sides. And I'm looking at it going, man, and for me, and I designed, and a friend of mine built 17 tiny, I call them tiny homes. They were about the same size, 15 by 36 in Virginia. And they're not vacant. They're rented full time. A lot of people are hitting that point where I don't need huge bedrooms. I need 3 of them. But what do? You sleep in your bedroom. I need big space. I need access. And I think what we're going to see over the next 5 years, I think we're going to see these cottage style dwellings, maybe with a detached garage. People love that. More livable community. I don't need, there's still going to be people who want a 3,500 square foot house. There are people going to want 2,100. These are like 11, they're less than 1,000 square feet, maybe just over 1,000. And I think you're going to start to see people go, what? That's what I need. I need my storage shed, my garage. I've got my kayak. I've got whatever I need. I don't need this sprawling thing. I can have this one here. I can have another one just like it, lakeside, close to the ocean. I think that may be where, as a populace, we might be heading.
That's really good insight. That's fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let me ask you, what would you consider to be your superpower?
My superpower is, and I know the folks at Loudoun County who just rewrote their ordinance will agree, and their FSM. I fostered this in myself early. I taught myself how to read ordinance and code to the point where I would find hidden nuance and opportunities within the overall code. And I still work at that today. In any jurisdiction, any code I read, I try and find that thing that was, because every code out there, every ordinance out there was written elsewhere, not in the jurisdiction where it's applied. I use Loudoun County. I spent a lot of time there. The Loudoun County code that they just revised, the original code was written in Littleton, Colorado, and they basically pirated it. So jurisdictions, they bring in consultants and they pirate code. And what happens is they grab things in total and they drop it in their code, and they don't read it. They don't try and digest it and try and utilize it. It's just there. And many times it goes unnoticed for years and years. And I found it in Virginia. I did 5 subdivision there under a code called rural commercial, RC. There was no density limit for residential. One of the projects I did was on 1.17 acres. We got 21 units, no impact fees, no proffers, buy done.
Wow.
And in the point after that, I did 5 of those, I think. And Loudoun County Board of Supervisors finally just did a text amendment to put, they went in. And the whole time they were calling it
The Hansen code. I was about to say, did they name it after you?
Loopholes. They call it loophole, like the Hansen loophole. We got to close that loophole. On my project in Augusta, Georgia, I don't know how anybody overlooked it, but the piece that we picked up, the 350 acres, someone had planned it out. They because of the wetlands and some other constraints, they had on a 247 acre tract, they had 350 units. I went in, I'm reading the code. Wait a minute, there's a conservation and open space option. If I give them 40% open space, okay, so I start reading what the options are for the open space. Wetlands, steep slopes, easements. Like, are you freaking kidding me? I had all those. We ended up with 1,500 lots.
Wow.
Because no one had ever applied that option to their development. I was like, are you kidding me? We submitted everything to the county or the city of Augusta, and the planners, I was on the phone because it was a Zoom DRC meeting, and he started laughing. He goes, I can't believe nobody's ever found this in our ordinance. Like, you're kidding me. He goes, this is the first application that has ever applied this.
Wow.
Like, okay. So we sailed through. I try to find those kind of things, or I try and find an opportunity to maybe request like a text amendment, not a rezoning. I don't want a rezoning. I want a text amendment. I think that this kind of option would work better than the way your ordinance is currently written. Would you guys entertain me offering this text amendment to change? I don't want to do 1 acre lots because they're not that, they take up too much ground. They do too much damage. Can I do 10,000 square foot lots with the same density? Let me calculate out my density at 1 acre. And so I can do 100 lots. Let me do 110,000 square foot lots and give you 50% open space. How about that?
Yeah, that's good.
So I had to say my superpowers, again, just being able to look through ordinance and code and find a nuance that fits to make what I'm attempting to propose or offer better.
That's so good.
Or increase the density to where a deal works versus having to go in and hack and slay through a rezoning.
That's really good stuff. I'm taking notes on that right now. So
it's honest to God, it is truly everywhere.
Wow.
It is probably in 90% of the places where you're doing stuff. There's an option to look at a piece of property that you think maybe 1 or 2 lots, where actually it could be 5. Or where you're looking at 10 acres thinking it's one thing, but in their own ordinance, in their own options, if you option in the right way, it completely changes what you can do.
Wow.
You get your blinders off. You can't go, I'm here and I'm looking at this and I'm looking at this. Yeah, honestly, and I tell people, I help people, and I always tell them, they ask me, what should I do? Okay, you got this piece of property, go read the ordinance. And when you're finished, put it down for a minute, go back and read it again, and try and find something in it that you didn't pick up the first time through. Because if you pick up 1 or 2 things, guess what? There's 10 more things. Every time you go back in, you're going to find the likelihood of you finding something that may help you escalates.
I love that. That is gold. That is absolute gold. I want to thank you so much, David,
Yeah.
for being so
Sure.
generous with your time and your
Okay.
information. Let me ask you, how can we give back to you? What connections or resources are you looking for right now?
I, again, I'll stay. Nothing really, and I appreciate that. I'd love to work. Like I've had conversations with a ton of people in our space now. I'd like to do a deal with you. I like to sit down. I like to collaborate with you because I know you got a ton of people. So maybe you could go back to somebody and go, "Wow, I had no idea. I thought this was this. I sent it over to this guy, and he came back and said, "Hey, maybe if you looked at it this way, it's something different." That's if you're asking for real, that would mean more to me than anything else. I we do a ton of stuff. I try and help. I actually do. I try and help as many people as I can. And I'm always, my wife says I'm over giving with my time. Rafi says I'm way over giving with my time. But, but I honestly I can't reiterate enough. I would rather spend an hour with somebody and cultivate them into the right and on the right path than follow them into a deal where I've got to go to an owner and go, okay, that should never have happened. Here's the real side of this. I know you don't want to hear it, and I'll give it to you. And you know, look, you can throw me out of the room. That's fine. But you're maybe I'll be the first. Maybe I'm the fifth person that's told you this after this one instance. And I will say that we've done that a number of times and been successful with people going, okay. But the other thing that the one other point that I would say, if you're going to do this, when you're negotiating the contract, and it's one thing that we do every single time, we provide the seller and their counsel with monthly updates, not from me, not from one of my partners, but from a licensed professional that tells them exactly where we are in the process, what's transpired, what work's been committed. And the reason that I do that from that licensed professional is because, and I'm sure you know this, but a lot of people don't. Someone questions your veracity and you have a license, they take you to DPOR and they have to call you in and talk to you. And it's not a fun process. So there's not a licensed professional out there that will lie.
Right.
Say that. There are some, but generally speaking, they're not going to risk their license to lie for you.
Right.
So they will give a very detailed, a very exacting summation of where the project is, what the status is. And we give that willingly.
And what type of professional is that? What type of license?
Civil engineer.
Civil engineer.
Civil engineer for you. You know what? But again, it's normally because you're extending a contract out. If you're in a contract for a year or 2 years, so the civil engineer, and I have all my engineers, they seal it, they put their seal, they put their signature. We found that it gives the seller and their counsel a lot of comfort.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. And so
if I could recommend anything, I would do that.
That's such a great gold nugget there. So if someone wants to reach out to you, potentially do a deal, how can they find you?
Check our website.
All right. What's the website?
Openland Communities, spelled all the way out.com.
Perfect.
And for me, my email is david@openlandcommunities.com. But check out the website. And we've got a couple of projects listed so you can see read about them and see the illustrations. Other than that, Facebook or Messenger, I'm there.
Excellent. And we'll definitely put that website in the show notes and
appreciate it. Yeah.
So thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. So much knowledge and wisdom shared today. And so I just want to thank you. This has been absolutely incredible. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine. I appreciate it, Kendall.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. We'll be in touch soon because I would love to do a deal with you and partner up on doing something really cool.
Yeah, I think that would be a true pleasure. I appreciate that.
Awesome. I love it. You take care. We'll talk to you soon. Everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
All right, man.
Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.